I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have restarted this video 3 or 4 times now because people keep texting me and I've got ADHD and I want this to be a one-take video. So let's get into it. If interest rates are the reason that you're not getting into short-term rentals in 2024, I think this video is going to be pretty important for you for a myriad of reasons. I'm going to talk about 3 strategies that I'm personally using. Okay, I'm not just talking about these strategies. These are things that I'm doing in 2024 to advance closer to my short-term rental goals. And yeah, high interest rates are high, but I think there's ways that you can maneuver around that if you're serious about expanding your portfolio or even getting started. Caveat: the third strategy is by far my favorite. It's a very good one. Your mouth will be watering by the end. You're going to be like, why don't you just do a whole video on this? Yeah, I get it. I'm going to make a series out of this. So bear with me. I promise you, these will all be very helpful for you. So 1, what's the first strategy that I'm doing? I'm reinvesting back into my properties. I have talked about this quite a bit on the channel over the last year. I'm sure you guys are probably like, okay, we get it. You're reinvesting back into your portfolio. Why are you doing this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. When you think about the effort that it takes to go and buy a short-term rental and set it up, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I'm literally setting up an Airbnb 2 minutes from my house, and I thought it was going to be a breeze. And let me tell you, it's actually been pretty hectic. Busiest I've ever really been in the last year, it feels like. And, you know, I'm doing some remodeling. I'm building a fence. I'm doing landscaping. I just added a bathroom, all so that I can make this Airbnb really, really, really nice. And it takes a lot of effort to do that. It would actually be a lot less effort to take a property that I already owned and just make it nicer. Because when you think about the effort that it takes to buy a property, you got to save up to 20% down payment. You got to work through the loan process. You got to find a realtor. You got to close on it. You got to furnish it. It's a lot of work. And so for me, I'm kind of going for this thing called ROT, return on time, where basically I am trying to maximize the time that I've already put into my short-term rentals. And I want to actually spend less time managing my properties at the same time, because right now, a lot of my properties are kind of older. They're a little creakier. They could use some more upkeep, some more investment to make them a little bit more autopilotable, if that makes sense. If I invest and make them nicer, if I put newer things, if I refreshen them, then the chances of things breaking and guests reaching out and it being such a kind of a high maintenance Airbnb is going to be a lot lower. And so for me, I find, I'll give you a perfect example. Hopefully this will sort of bring it home for you. I've got my property in Los Angeles. I actually did a video in the studio of this house last week. And it was an old studio that I decommissioned. It was like one of the first Airbnbs I ever had. It got really gross in there because I had a long-term tenant in there and I just never cleaned it up. And I was just like, I'm not going to deal with it. And so I've been analyzing my property and thinking, well, how can I actually make more money with the existing portfolio that I had? And then I just realized the studio, I started looking at comps, and, you know, studios at this size in Los Angeles could be making like $2,000 a month in rent as a long-term rental. $1,800 on the low end, $2,200 on the high end. And that's like anywhere from $18,000 to $24,000 a year in cash flow. I'm already profitable on that property. So if I can make an extra $20K, it is literally like almost $2,000 of profit that goes into my pocket. So when I think about that, I'm like, okay, well, what can I do right now to get that property cash flowing for me? And so what I've decided is I've hired a crew to come in and clean it up. And it's not going to be a crazy remodel. We're talking changing out the baseboards, painting everything white, adding a new shower, adding some cabinets to the kitchen. I mean, it's a bigger remodel probably than I had intended, but all in, I'm going to be in about $15,000 into this property. I trust the crew. I know them. They're actually the people that build my tiny house in Los Angeles, and it's going to be done in like 2 weeks. So $15,000, 2 weeks of my time, but now I'm going to have a shiny new sparkly space that I can rent and make $2,000 hopefully every single month. So I'm reinvesting back into that property. All that I just said is significantly easier than going and buying a new property. I have a property in Bryan, Texas that's been doing so-so. I've actually done a video at this one where, you know, Bella, she went and did the murals and everything like that. But for the most part, that property has been okay. But I was like, all right, well, how can I make more money with this property? So we've invested about $30,000 into that property. And that $30,000 was to build a new deck around the cowboy pool, add a pickleball court, and then convert a shed that was like old and kind of gross into an open space that has a mural in it, a pool table, and we're calling it the Game Day House. And already June and May have made a total of like $4,000 or $5,000 more those 2 months than I did last year. So I've already seen like a super increase in ROI just based on those small renovations. Horrible cell phone photos. We haven't had the photographer out yet because we're not done yet. But that property I expect will probably increase at a minimum. I'm going to go low here, $15,000 per year. And that's going to be $15,000 of profit for the most part because we were already profitable on that property. So as you can see, when you start to figure out that you actually have these gold mines at your property already or within your portfolio already, the first inclination I have is like, all right, well, what can I do? What can I tighten up? What can I fix in my own portfolio to make more money? Strategy 1, reinvest back into what you already have. It will probably yield the best results out of any strategy out there in the short-term rental space. 2, co-hosting. What is co-hosting? Co-hosting is basically the practice of managing someone else's property and then getting paid a percentage of their gross revenue to do so. Now, it's a little different than rental arbitrage. I have a few rental arbitrage units myself. Y'all know that I don't really love arbitrage, but the concept with arbitrage is you go to a landlord, you pitch them on the idea of renting their place on Airbnb or renting their place from them, furnishing it, and then relisting it on Airbnb. If the rent to the landlord is $1,500, then you as the Airbnb operator have to make more than $1,500 to be profitable. As a matter of fact, you probably have to make $2,500 to $3,000 to be profitable. And I don't really like that model as much these days. It's the model that I got started on because I just think there's a lot of risk. I think there's a lot of reasons why that can go sour on you. That landlord could sell the property. I don't want to get into why I don't like arbitrage. I have plenty of videos on my POV there. But ultimately, the strategy that I do like that is slightly different, it's a different take on it, it's co-hosting. It's basically you, instead of going to the landlord and saying, hey, let me rent the property from you, and then I'm going to furnish it, and I'm going to pay you rent every month. Instead of saying that, you're going to say, hey, landlord, I am going to take your property, and I'm going to help you make money with this property. You are going to furnish it. I will run it for you. I will make it more passive for you. And I will charge you 20% of the gross revenue for my services. Now, there's a lot of kind of back and forth you're going to have with that landlord. Landlords are cheap. They're not going to want to spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on furnishings. It's not easy. It's not like I can just snap my finger and have 50 landlords that are down to do this. It's a real business that I have to build up. But what I like about co-hosting specifically is that in the co-hosting world, if you make $0, you make $0. If you make $1,000, then if you charge a 20% management fee, you'll make $200. If you make $5,000, then as a co-host, you'll make $1,000. So even if you make no money, you are out no money. That is what I like about co-hosting. In rental arbitrage, if your rent is $1,500 and you make no money that month, guess what? You are out $1,500 because no matter what, you owe that landlord the rent. And that's what you agreed to. And a lot of people don't make money in the arbitrage game. So I don't really like that. The co-hosting side is juicy and rainbow and butterfly-y that I'm making it seem. There is a caveat here. It's not just easy money. It's not like, oh yeah, like there's no risk in this for me. Like if I make $0 if the landlord makes $0 and I don't lose money, like that's kind of how I just portrayed it. But I want you to understand the flip side. You have to be a good co-host because if you're not, that landlord is going to say, hey, I don't really feel like you're pulling your weight here. And they're going to fire you and they're going to hire the next co-host. They're probably going to try to find a cheaper co-host. If you're a really good co-host and you're expensive, let's say that 20 to 30% gross revenue range, if you're making that landlord significantly more than they were going to make market value renting it out to a long-term tenant, they're going to want to keep you around. So you still have to be good if you want the job security. If you go into co-hosting thinking like, no skin off my back one way or another, you'll get fired and you deserve to get fired. So I love co-hosting. A lot of bad apples out there. I'm trying to create a community of good apples, delicious apples, of people that can co-host with integrity because as great as that business model is, it still requires an operational element, a human touch for it to be good, and you still have to be a good host. So co-hosting is something that I'm actually getting into, and the reason I'm bringing up this strategy is it's the most dead-on, simple way to get started in the short-term rental game with $0. When dollars, I don't know why I said it that way, but I want to talk about that because when you see the TikTok people or the Instagram people or the Reels, I see these people that are like, did you know you can get into Airbnb without even owning property? And it's like, you blah, blah, you know, I don't like that whole rhetoric. And it's not really even true. With rental arbitrage, you have to pay money out of pocket. I don't care if you get business credit, if you get a 0% interest line of credit, you still need to come out of pocket $10,000 to $15,000 in most instances, 10 to 20,000, 10 to 30. It just depends on how much and how crazy you're going to go with your unit. But you still have to come out of money, even if it's a 0% interest business line of credit, which whatever, we don't even have to get into that. But even if that were the case, even if it's 0% interest for 18 months, you're still paying the money. You're just paying 0% interest on it. Co-hosting, you can literally get into it with zero money. Like there's no money that's required from you whatsoever. Now, maybe you'll pay for, let's say, your property management system or the pricing, and you're going to pay for that. I mean, we're talking like 50, 60 bucks. Most of the time, I'm going to charge that back to the landlord anyways. But it is really a low stakes, low risk way to break into this industry. And it's not really a place that I was anticipating wanting to make money. I've never wanted to get into property management. It's not really, or co-hosting. It's never really a place that I wanted to. I barely want to manage my own properties. So I don't want to do it for other people. But the reason that I'm getting into this is, I can't say too much now, but I'm basically possibly acquiring a property, like a business, a direct booking business that is centered around doctors and physicians and high income earners. And effectively, we will be offering co-hosting services to those individuals that want it to be completely passive so that they can go and work the really busy doctor jobs. I'm also going to be growing my co-hosting business in Houston, Texas. I'm not really interested in doing co-hosting outside of Texas in general. Houston will be my home base, mostly because I think quality control will be a lot higher if it's in my city, and I want to make content about my short-term rentals, and it's hard to do that when they're all over the country. So I'm going to be doing some co-hosting. The math on it's pretty great. If you can get 10 properties that make, let's say, $50,000 a year, that's $500,000 a year that you can make as a co-host. If you charge 20%, that's $100,000 a year that you can make as a co-host, which is, about $88,000 a month. The numbers on that are pretty good. And when I start thinking about it as a business, if you sell a co-hosting or a property management company, the multiples are pretty good too. I've heard, I don't know the exact number off my head, but you could possibly sell for 5x, your profits on that. So that alone gets me kind of thinking, okay, well, I know I could get 10 clients at $50,000 a piece. Can I get 100? If I can get 100, that's $5 million in revenue, $1 million that I can make every single year in profit. There's a lot of costs there and everything, obviously, but I'm saying 20%, that's my profit. I still have operational expenses and everything like that, but I could actually build a 7-figure business doing that with my team. And then maybe one day I can sell it. Not really in the vision right now, but I'm just thinking like, what are some other businesses in the short-term rental world that I can create high cash flow, because cash flow is king. I'm already building wealth with everything else. I try not to make money from the Airbnbs that I own. I always reinvest it back into other stuff. But I've got other people on my team and business partners and people that are like, hey, that was really fun for a long time, but we'd also like to make money now. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. So we're kind of reverse engineering a co-hosting company that I think will be pretty cool once we get up to speed. I'm going to say this. If you're watching this video, I don't want to manage your properties. If you're watching this channel, you should be a self-managing person or someone looking to grow your own business. You don't need me. I have this channel to teach you how to self-manage and how to run a short-term rental business. You don't need me to manage it for you. This isn't a sales pitch for my co-hosting business. Not right now, maybe later, but right now the idea is I'm going to manage for people that have no desire whatsoever to manage their properties. I don't even have a link. So that's how you know I'm not pitching you yet. Okay? So that's strategy number 2. Number 1, reinvesting back into my properties, trying to get a better return on my time so that I don't have to manage them as much because they're nice, new, less maintenance, and I can make more money on them, blah, blah, blah. 2, co-hosting. That's the second thing that I'm trying to do right now to make more cash flow. In 3, man, I don't want to open this can of worms so late after I was like, oh, I don't want this video to be long. 3 is going to be creative hosting. What is creative hosting? Well, to understand creative hosting, you have to understand the fundamentals of creative finance. And creative finance is basically when you buy real estate, when you buy property using non-traditional methods. Meaning, if I want to buy a property from a seller, instead of going to the bank, I'm going directly to the seller. There's a couple ways that I can do this. I can get a seller finance. I can finance it from the seller. This is called seller finance, where they act as the bank, and I'm basically paying them every single month. I've done videos on this exact concept. Property that I'm launching right now, I got seller finance from the seller, who basically financed 90% of it, and he just wanted a 10% down payment. He gave me a 3% interest rate. And what I love about seller finance is I get to negotiate the terms, and I get to get a better interest rate than what a bank is offering me. So I said I got a 3% interest rate from the seller for the property that I'm launching right now. Well, at that time, interest rates were 8.5%. So I got a 5% reduction in interest just by financing it directly from the seller. Now, it's not like those deals are just hanging out. It's not like they're just so easy to get. But in some capacities, I think they kind of are. I mean, I don't know, like 0%, 100% seller finance properties, I thought were kind of like very rare. But as I get into this creative finance world, I actually kind of am realizing that they're not all that rare. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a 0% interest, 0% down, 100% seller finance property in Los Angeles right now. The fact that those words even just left my mouth means that deal is not going to happen. But it all happened. I found it on the Zillow. I found it on the MLS, and I just started texting the realtor about it. And I said, hey, would your seller be open to this? And they said, yeah. So I submitted my letter of intent, and I'm waiting to hear back on if that's going to get accepted. I have another student of mine. Her name is Tara. She's awesome. She went into the MLS, typed in seller finance, and found a seller that was willing to finance the entire property, no money out of her pocket, for a 4% interest rate. And it was 4% interest only. So she doesn't pay principal or anything. She's just paying a little bit of interest every single month. And she was like, Rob, I'm going to get to cash flow on a long-term rental. It's awesome. I'm like, awesome. So Tara, congratulations. So seller finance is one kind of way that you can do the creative finance thing. There's kind of 2 other methods, and I don't want to get into the weeds of this because it'll make the video much longer. But the second method is subject to, popularized by my good friend. I mean, really the entire creative finance umbrella popularized by Pace Morby. But he really, he owns the sub-2 thing, and he's taught me so much in this world. But subject to is basically whenever you take over payments on someone's mortgage and the home is deeded to you, and you're making payments on behalf of the original seller, or on behalf of the original owner. Now, it's not assuming their mortgage. That's something that I hear oftentimes where you're actually assuming it. That's actually a little bit of a different process because when you assume the mortgage, you're actually putting that mortgage in your name. The actual mortgage and financial obligation is technically still in the name of the owner when you're doing a sub-2. So there's a lot of kind of paperwork and things that you have to work out to make sure that the seller is protected, to make sure that you're protected. Like I said, I'm opening up a can of worms here, but sub-2 is really great because when you take over payments on a property and you are deeded the property in your name, you are now the owner of it. And not only are you taking over payments, but you're also taking over the interest rate associated with that initial mortgage. So I've got a property in Austin, the Pink Pickle. My interest rate on that was 3.375% because I took over the payments on that. I took over kind of that interest rate as well. What else do I have? Oh, my Crystal Beach property. At that time, the interest rate, I think on that property was 5%. I took over payments on that. So it's a really interesting way to get into this space because you can actually, the whole like high interest rates thing doesn't exist because you can actually take over the interest rates on a sub-2. And it's a pretty neat little world, but lots of caveats there. The due on sale clause is one of them, right? If the bank finds out about this, if they don't like it, they'll say, hey, we want we want the entire mortgage paid back. And now you got to scramble to kind of work with the bank to either pay back the loan balance in full or quitclaim deed it back to the original seller and then work it out on the back. I mean, there's a lot of caveats there. That's why I want to do a whole video on this, but the due on sale clause is something I want to talk about because it does get called every so often. There are people that are left in a bad spot. It's not really something that I like for necessarily super, super green beginner investors that don't really know what they're getting into. You should understand the foundation of creative finance. You should understand the foundations of investment before you get into that space. I'm pretty seasoned, and I've been able to really grow my portfolio for pretty quickly, and with not as much money out of my pocket as I would have to with going traditional and putting 20% down. Because oftentimes, especially with the sub 2 or a seller finance, you are typically you're coming out less out of pocket. I'm typically targeting like a 10% down payment or less, or we call it an entry fee, a 10% entry fee to take over that property or to buy it. So I'm usually able to get in for like 10% down or less. So that's sub 2, seller finance sub 2. And then there's this kind of third option called a hybrid, a creative hybrid deal. And basically what that is whenever you take over someone's payments, and let's say that the loan balance on that, you're taking over someone's payments via sub 2, and let's say that the loan balance on that is $300,000, but the house is now worth $500,000. Well, you take over the payments, and then the seller is going to say, well, hey, I still have $200,000 of equity. Where's my money? And so in that instance, we would do what's called like a hybrid, where we take over the payments. So we would take over payments on $300,000, and then that leftover $200,000 split, we will either pay a down payment to the seller, let's say $100,000 in this instance, and then the other $100,000 we're financing directly from the seller, basically like a seller finance, and we're making payments towards that. So not only do you have the original payment for the mortgage, but now you have a small payment that you're paying to the seller as well. Now, you don't necessarily have to put down $100,000. I'm just kind of giving you an arbitrary example here. But a hybrid is basically when you take a sub 2 and a seller finance, you smash them together because you're taking over payments, and then the equity, you're making payments to the seller to bring down that equity balance. And those are kind of like the three facets of creative finance. There's a lot of other kind of more complicated ways to get into it, but as far as what I do and what I teach, that's creative finance in a nutshell. And then that brings us to kind of like the final piece of this, which is creative hosting. And why I wanted to describe creative finance first was because in order to enact creative hosting, which is the strategy that I teach, the strategy that I do, is creative hosting is basically taking the art of creative finance and smashing it together with the art of Airbnb and short-term rentals. And that's creative hosting. Creative hosting is basically creative finance in the world of short-term rentals, and how you can use creative finance to basically buy and acquire properties using the creative finance method. I didn't make up creative finance. It's not something that I claim to have done. Some people are always like, he's just doing what Pace did. And I'm like, no, Pace taught me how to do this. I'm just doing it in the Airbnb world. So yeah, I wouldn't even be here talking about this were it not for my own mentors in the space like Pace and like so many others. But creative hosting is just kind of looking at creative finance in the lens of Airbnb, and where it really starts to get supercharged and really crazy is you can get into these creative finance properties into your next short-term rental using creative finance, right? But then you can start really pulling the levers here of wealth and, start enacting the short-term rental loophole, where basically you can get into this property for little to no money down sometimes, run it, materially participate in the management of it, and then do bonus depreciation with the cost segregation report, and then basically offset your taxes by a whole lot of money. Sometimes you can offset your taxes by more than the money that you actually paid to get into the deal. And it all really just starts to come to a head, and you can effectively get properties for free in a weird way. Not really, but it kind of feels that way sometimes. If you're materially participating in the management of your business, like if you're the one that's actually self-managing your Airbnb and you've never done a cost segregation report before, you might be wondering, what does it even mean to materially participate? There's a link in the description down below that's like the 7 ways that you can do it. It'll explain it to you. But a cost segregation report is like, you can go to strcosseg.com, which is my company, and you can get a cost segregation report done for super, 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 super cheap, like very little money, and it can save you, or it can lower your taxes by quite a bit. But yeah, creative hosting is creative finance, the short-term rental loophole, getting into properties using creative finance, getting into Airbnb properties using creative finance, and just smashing them all together to accelerate how you can expand your Airbnb portfolio. Now, I know a lot of you are like, slow down. I didn't get any of that. I get it. Creative finance is one of those things that's like really hard because it's so simple, is what I like to say. So if you're interested in kind of learning more about creative finance and getting into this space, I've got a link down at the bottom that will take you to my case study on creative hosting, how it works, how you can use it with the short-term rental loophole and everything like that. But also, if you're interested, leave me a comment down below. Say, hey, that sounded interesting. Can you do a more thorough video on this? And I would love to do it. Anytime you guys are like, hey, I want this content, I always fulfill. I always make more content around it. I just got to know that y'all are interested in it. And that's today's video. Those are the 3 steps that I'm using. I'm investing back into my properties, I'm co-hosting, and then I'm using creative hosting, aka creative finance and Airbnb smashed together to accelerate my Airbnb portfolio. That's today's video. The last thing I'm going to say is I would love to meet you in person at HostCon. It's my short-term rental conference happening August 29th through the 31st in Houston, Texas. You've got a couple more days to get early bird pricing, meaning like $600 off. Tickets right now are super, super, super cheap. They're the cheapest they will ever be for the next like 3 days, and then prices go up. But we've got Cody Sanchez speaking, Tarek El Moussa, Levi Kelly, me, Bridget Whitney, Isaac French, Luke Carl. So many cool people are speaking at HostCon. We'd love to meet you. Come meet me in Houston, Texas. Let's hang out. I promise you it's a life-changing event. No one has ever regretted going to HostCon. It's freaking awesome. If you've been to HostCon, show me some love down in the description or in the comments down below. Thanks everybody for watching. Happy Monday. Talk to you soon. Bye.